Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Julia. I was an admission officer at Haverford College, an outside reader for Emory University, and I currently work as a school-based counselor at a school in Massachusetts.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Good morning, friends. I'm out here traveling on the road doing college visits. 2 days ago, I had a great day at the College of Charleston in Charleston, South Carolina. And yesterday, I had a sensational time at the state's capital, the University of South Carolina in Columbia. You know, I'd never visited Charleston before. And I had visited University of South Carolina in Columbia, but this time for both institutions, I really left feeling I get it. I get it. Now I know the right kid to send to each school. And that's the best feeling you can have as a college counselor. And so now I'm in Augusta, Georgia, and I'll be heading home later today. So this week we'll start out with a question from a listener, and it's from a mom. And she wants to know whether her students should discuss something really bad that happened years ago at their high school. Should that be brought up in the application? Julia will join me for that. And our roundtable is back. That's right, 5 of us, 3 women, 2 men from 5 different states. We've got Julia in Massachusetts. We've got Susan in Pennsylvania. We've got Hillary Dickman, who's an assistant director of admission at Colorado College in Colorado. And we have Vince Garcia in California. And then I'm in there as well. And so really it's our In the News team. And then Hillary, because we wanted someone that's in committee currently reading files to weigh in on issues. And so you're going to be hearing from our roundtable for many weeks. But this week, we're going to answer one more question that came in on the activity section that we never got a chance to address when we talked about the activity section the last time. And then we're moving on to honors starting next week. And then for our interview, we have a brand new interview. And it's with Matt Carpenter, the founder of College Aid Pro. And we've never really done a deep dive on student loans or parent loans, basically loans for college. And so that's what Matt and I will do over the next 2 weeks. We'll be focusing on 4 loans: federal direct student loan, the Parent Plus loan, state loans, and private loans. And then for our college spotlight, Linda is back for part 2 of her interview with Tara Williams, the dean of Barrett College. It's our first interview ever on an honors college. What is it that honors colleges have to offer? And we picked one of the best ones in the country. Thanks, Linda, for that. Friends, I'm going to tell you something. If you're used to really long episodes on Thursday with your college-bound kid, you're not going to get that today. This may be the shortest Thursday episode we've ever had. I can only think of one that was under an hour, and I'm pretty sure this one's going to be under an hour. So it's going to go really fast, but hope you enjoy it.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right, Julia's back. Hi, Julia.
Hi, Mark.
And we have an anonymous listener with a very creative question, but I'm sure that others might have this thought wandered through their mind as well. So I'm going to play the question, and Julia, I'm going to let you comment.
Hey, team. I have been enjoying your podcast, which I found fairly recently. I have a high school sophomore, soon to be a rising junior. We have retained a college counselor already, probably because we live in a competitive, relatively high wealth part of the world. But my question is, this child of mine happens to go to a high school, a public high school, that, well, to make a long story short, something bad happened about 7 or 8 years ago. It was an Instagram issue and made certainly statewide news, and then a book has been written about it. So I would say, at least locally, it's hard to know exactly, but locally, it's a bit notorious now. Again, this is something that happened 7 or 8 years ago, certainly didn't involve my student or any students currently there. But what I'm wondering is, for a student who is coming out of a high school that is notorious for something bad, is there any prejudice or bias or any reason to address it in their admissions materials, especially if they're going to the type of, or applying to the type of selective college where the admission staff has regional reps and might be likely to hear about this? So a bit of a niche question, but I feel like in the age of social media, there's a lot of possibilities for bad things to happen, and it probably will come up for others. Thanks so much.
Well, I'm pleased to say, and I hope you agree with me, Mark, that you have nothing to worry about. I also used to work at a school that had a really big, massive scandal that was made into a Lifetime movie. And in fact, I didn't even know about it until I got there.
Sure.
But a college will not hold against your student or any of the other students a scandal that occurred. One thing, though, I do think the roots of your question are not do come from a place that I could totally understand, where certainly if you've got a high school that maybe has a continuing reputation for something, that, not to say that the admission officer or the college would take that out on the applicant, but for example, I used to read Southern California, and there's this great school on the campus of UC San Diego, and it came out that the grades, the AP scores, I think, or something, had been inflated by the school district to get more funding and to really move up on the rankings. So here we were as admission officers treating this school as like, wow, this is one of the best public schools in the country. And then we find out that ranking came from some, purposely deceptive data. Would I take that on the student, though? No, it would just be something to think about. But I think especially when it's an individual or a group of individuals at a school that made a bad choice and that maybe made national news, that should never, I think we hear a lot about instances of racial bias, and that's actually a euphemism really for some of the things that have happened. We've seen in Massachusetts, we've seen some sports teams that have maybe done some gestures in photos or some graffiti, and no colleges took that out on the students that might have applied, because that was the action of a group of people rather than something about the school or the caliber of the school, the high school.
So I disagree with you, Julia.
Oh, really?
I'm joking.
Oh, I was like, what? I was like, have I been making a huge mistake?
No, I'm trying to not just have a little fun. I knew I'd get a reaction out of you. I agree 100%. It's that you have nothing to worry about. You should see Julia. She's got a huge smile over here. I got her good on that one.
I was like, oh gosh, maybe that's why my students hadn't been getting into college.
No, I like. The listener made it clear that her student had absolutely nothing to do with it at all. It was a while ago. None of the other students at the school. It's just a complete non-factor. You have absolutely nothing to worry about. And Julie and I feel as strong about this as anything that we've talked about on here. So don't worry about it. Now, but I did have a thought. I was trying to think, besides just, that's the end of that question. Next. I had a thought pop in my mind. When I was in admissions, what are things that have happened in the past that might impact reading? And the one thing that I thought of is one of our biggest feeders would send recommendations sometimes where every kid was like the best kid they've ever had.
Totally.
And that really discredited that recommendation. It did nothing for the kid. And so it doesn't mean that we held it against the kid, but they lost that ability for that recommender to have any weight whatsoever. It was like we just didn't even read it because we can't, like, I always tell people admissions is risk reward and it's about trust. What are the trust factors that build trust? What are the flag factors that might put a question on trust? And that just, like when you feel you can't trust what someone's saying, then they have no voice. But we still never held it against the kid. They actually lost the ability to maybe have a recommender help them. And we just used the other things in the file to make a decision. And that's the only thing that I can think of. I can think of times when we maybe had our antenna up a little bit. I can think of a school that had a massive problem, like with bullying and some things like that. And, we just had our antenna up for anything. Is there discipline in the file? Was there anything like that? But you don't indiscriminately apply it to somebody because of a past reputation.
Right.
Anything else you want to add?
No, that was a great point too. And so don't worry about it. Even if it's a current event that happens for any other listeners, you do not need to worry about it.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because someone might think, yeah, well, my event's not 7 years ago, but it's current. So I'm glad you threw that in. The same principle applies. And by the way, it's great when we get, some of these questions that we've never had before. They're cool. And so keep sending them in. speakpipe.com/YCBK. All right, friends, let's transition to our roundtable discussion about the activity section. Friends, I am jazzed. I am pumped because I'm with four of my friends. Top left corner, we have Julia, then we have Vince, we have Hillary, and we have Susan. Welcome back to the roundtable, part 2.
Hello. Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
And thank you, our listeners. It's only because of the feedback we got from the last time we did this a couple months ago that we decided to do it again. And so we're going to be talking about the honors section of the Common Application over the next several weeks. But before we do, we had one question that came in on activities. And I said, hey, we're doing the roundtable. We'll get it in. So this is from Dina in San Jose.
Hi, my name is Dina. I'm calling from San Jose, California. Love the show. I just listened to the 3-part activity list segment, which I loved every second of. Grateful for it. But I still had a question, which is, my daughter does something meaningful, but it's only one weekend of the year. Since she was in kindergarten, every summer we've gone to a conference with other children who have her same syndrome. And as she's gotten older, the last 2 summers, she's actually been assigned as a mentor to younger children who have the same syndrome for the entire weekend. And she finds it impactful. I think it is too. It's definitely part of what makes her her. And she'd like to list it on the activity list, but it really is only 3 days of the 352 days a year. So I wasn't quite sure how she could include that. If you have any insight into that, I appreciate it. And I hope it applies to other people as well. Thanks as always. Bye-bye.
Yeah, I think that this is a great thing to include in your activities, but I probably wouldn't leave it just at that. It sounds like it's a really meaningful engagement that you have, and it sounds like you've developed some important personal qualities through it. And so I would try probably to highlight it somewhere else in your application, whether that's in an essay or a supplemental college-specific essay or in the additional information section somewhere. I would want to highlight it because we won't get the full picture just from seeing what's in the activity section.
And that's just good advice for anything that's meaningful to somebody, right? I mean, like, there's only so much you can do with 150 characters if you really want to make it pop.
Yeah, and especially with something that's short-term engagement like that, but that she's obviously doing some, background work on the rest of the year. She must be thinking about it if she's in a leadership position and it's changing her and who she is. It sounds important enough to mention somewhere else.
And I would also say, I think it's important to really think about using the whole space. So you have 150 characters in the description, and then you have 50 characters in the lead title, I guess. And then there's an organization, there's 100 characters. So try to pick out the thing that will explain that particular activity. Like spoke in front of 10,000 people at the conference, or something that really highlights the strength and the impact of her work. That would be really important. So you can do that. But I love the idea of expanding upon it in some type of why essay. If something is really that important and shows commitment, I think that colleges would be interested in hearing about it there if it sort of answers the question in a particular way.
And friends, I hope you noticed both Hillary and Vince commented on impact, how you changed, how you grew, the significance of it rather than just listing it, which is one of the biggest mistakes that we see. I don't have the exact verbatim, but if you go back and look right in the Common App, under activities, and it kind of gives a list of the kinds of things to talk about, and it actually says something like something meaningful to you as one of the subcategories. So right there, there's any permission structure that you need. It's like include it right in there when it kind of gives you examples of some of the kinds of things to include. Oh, go ahead, Julia.
Oh, I just think it's also I think it's a really cool activity and a really important experience as well. And on top of that, there are other students who might not have that exact experience, but who attend a conference that's just 2 or 3 days a year and they don't even do any planning for it. And that can often be a really meaningful experience, especially because they can serve as affinity spaces, a place to gather with other people who share your experiences that you really can't replicate elsewhere. And that is also really important for colleges to see, is how you sort of engage with your community in a way that you find relationships and connection across that.
Absolutely. It's a good way to explore and understand your identity from that perspective too, I think.
And then also the sense I get with we only have the word syndrome, but it doesn't sound like it's something 90% of the people have. So it's probably something pretty unique to who you are. And anything that's pretty unique to any aspect of identity, that's going to be of great interest to any admission officer who's attempting to get to know you better. And you clearly seem comfortable about this to talk about it, or you wouldn't bring it up. So, yeah, I think it's an important insight into who you are. Friends, our roundtable is back next week. And for 6 weeks in a row, we will take 6 different questions that you, our listeners, sent in. 5 from parents and 1 from a student. In some cases, somebody had 3 or sometimes even more questions in the same SpeakPipe question. And if the listener asks 3 or 4 questions, then we'll answer all of those in that same episode. So all in all, there are about 12 questions that came in related to the honors section, and we'll be answering them over the next 6 weeks right here on your College Bound Kid. We'll now transition to a brand new interview with Matt Carpenter on using loans for college.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, in part 1 of an interview with Matt Carpenter, where we're looking at understanding 4 different types of loans for college. Matt gives his backstory. Matt shares how he got his college knowledge. Matt discusses why he is so bullish about the federal direct student loan. Matt shares his perspective on the Parent Plus loan. And he has something we love at YCBK. He has plenty of nuance. Listen and enjoy. Friends, you're in for a treat today. I'm here with Matt Carpenter, who's the founder of College Aid Pro. Welcome to the Your College Bound Kid podcast, Matt.
I appreciate you having me. I'm excited.
We're excited as well. And before I get started, I have to give a shout out to one of our regular listeners who basically urged me multiple times that I have to have you on this podcast. And so after listening to her name is Julia Mott. She's from the Pacific Northwest. And I looked into your work and happy to have you here.
Happy to be here again, and thank you, Julia.
So, Matt, why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about your backstory? Anything you want to share? Walk us right up to what you're doing now.
So this college world ecosystem, whatever you want to call it, is all I've ever known professionally. I graduated from college, as a matter of fact, 20 years ago. Just had our 20-year
Nice.
anniversary. Not long after that, started a company called College Funding Services. And the genesis of that was really the experience that I had in going to college with my family collectively. I'm the oldest of 3 kids. I graduated, went through the whole process with my head in the sand. I think my parents did too. And then kind of saw what the outcome was after the fact. And it wasn't great financially. And I looked around the room talking to buddies. That was not unique, right? So many folks had some type of similar outcome, I guess. And I had a great experience in all of that. But looking back, I said, wow, we probably could have done some things differently that would have made this a better financial outcome. And that was how we got started, right? Because I realized there was probably an opportunity there as well. Started that business. I grew up in the Boston area, just north of Boston. So we're predominantly in the Northeast. A real good friend of mine that I went to college with, Stonehill College, by the way, a little private college outside of Boston. Grew up in North Jersey. So we got started down there, New York City and Jersey, and had a decent start in the Northeast. But as we expanded and tried to scale, one of our biggest pain points was that there was really no good technology in this space for what we do, which really focuses on financial aid, scholarships, affordability. And so it was finally about 7 years ago that we said, if we're going to do this the right way, we're going to have to somehow do it ourselves, right? With no tech background, just subject matter expertise in this world. And that was the birth of College Aid Pro, right? Where we tried to say, hey, can we provide the services that we provide via a technology, right? The way that we articulate is like TurboTax, right? TurboTax of this process. We had the experts that you can talk to, but we didn't have the technology, kind of for the masses or for the DIYers. So, yeah, so that's how we got started. I mean, I'm just incredibly grateful to be in this space. It's unbelievably rewarding. It's incredibly challenging, but it's such a big decision, such a kind of benchmark in so many families' lives that it's great to be a part of it and have an impact. So, yeah, that's where we're at.
Really excited to have you here. I mean, cost of college is a massive concern. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but the most expensive colleges in this country are about to break through the $100,000 mark for someone sitting out there with a sophomore or junior, 3 to 5%, increases every year. And then that's after tax money. The state schools consistently seem to be reducing their funding and passing more costs on. So the cost of college is a huge concern. Thrilled to have you here. So how did you get your college knowledge in this space?
On the front lines. I mean, just really being in the weeds, working with families, right? Took the leap of faith, started a business, researched as best I could to try to have some level of expertise. But in my opinion, you can't truly gain experience or knowledge, wisdom, etc. in this space in particular until you're on the front lines working with families from the beginning of the process to the end, right? Because it's not just the numbers, it's the emotional and psychological component that is a huge piece of this. I mean, something that we'll say usually multiple times a day when talking to parents, it's like, no kidding, you're overwhelmed. It's your kids and your money. Those are two pretty provocative things for most of us, right? So when you're dealing with that, it doesn't matter how much you know about this. You got to get in there and work with families and understand how to have these conversations, understand how colleges operate from that side of the fence as well. So, I would say was my biggest resume builder, is just working with all sorts of different families that range the whole spectrum, all sorts of different colleges. And I think that's the only way to do it.
Yeah, and I think, we'll get more into this later, but I know you've assembled a team of quite a few experts around you that you've built up over time. I love a couple of things you've said already. Kids and money, two things people love, and people care about what they love. And I love the TurboTax analogy. I think people can relate to that. Like, be the TurboTax in the college admission space. So Matt, we're doing a kind of a double interview here. We're going to get into College Aid Pro in some depth. But before we do that, thought I'd just chat with you about some of the frequently asked questions that I get all the time, you get all the time. Let's start out with a federal direct student loan. I've heard you say, and I would agree, that it's something that almost every family should consider, even ones that may not need it at times. Explain your rationale for that, because I think that would come as a surprise to some people.
Yeah, I'm pretty stubborn on this recommendation. And, usually I'll say, you got to talk me out of why it's not a good idea to take advantage of the federal direct student loan. But I'll start with telling you why I think it's a good idea. Look, if you're a family, like most families, that needs to borrow anything for college, generally speaking, with few exceptions, this is the best place to start, right? It's the only loan that is just in the student's name. They don't need a cosigner. They don't need established credit. They're not going to get a bill until 6 months after college. Longer than that, if they go on to grad school or they go into the Peace Corps, it can be deferred further. And it's incredibly flexible repayment terms. And also potential forgiveness opportunities based on what the student decides to do professionally. Now, look, the rates used to be incredibly competitive. In today's market, they're not as attractive, but within the educational loan space, still about as good as it gets, right? Or certainly on that side of the spectrum. So again, if you're a family that needs to borrow, this is where we start, okay? And we want kids to have some skin in the game, right? No loans is obviously ideal. It's not realistic for most families in today's climate. And I think there's a ton of, not just anecdotally, do I like students to have skin in the game? A lot of data supports that. The kids have better outcomes when they are actually invested, right, in this experience, which makes sense, right? Which makes a ton of sense. And something that, again, I say every day, I say, look, if your kid graduates with $27,000 in debt, which is the total amount you can borrow over the course of 4 years through this program, you've hit a grand slam as a family. I don't care where they went to college. I don't care what they major in. That's almost a foolproof investment, in my opinion. Okay. So the other side of the coin here are those families that are fortunate enough where they don't need their kids to borrow and or they don't want their kids to borrow. I will still make the firm recommendation they take advantage of this program. It's usually met with pushback. But my rationale is that since this loan is only in the kid's name, and again, they don't require a cosigner, take out that loan each year. Pay it off instantaneously if you have the means to do so. That way, you're building up credit each year. Your kid graduates from college as a 22-year-old with established credit. They can go lease their own car, rent their own apartment without a cosigner, and they're independent, right? It's just a great perk. If you have the means to do so, it's a great perk. There's some other benefits as well that, if things change in subsequent years and all of a sudden there's a job loss and you want to appeal for more money at colleges, they're going to look back as part of that appeal process to see if you took advantage of that loan in previous years. And if you didn't, it's really going to hurt your chance of appealing for more money, even if you had a major change. So in that way, it's almost like hedging insurance, right? If something happens in year 3, I've done this to maximize my odds that the college will work with me.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
And friends, if you're a regular listener of the Your College Bound Kid podcast, you know Susan and I had an In the News discussion on lifting the veil. It was really on Inside Higher Ed's interview with Stephen Bird, a prolific writer on higher ed. And he also wrote a book. And Harvard Press sent me that book, and I've been reading it, and I can't put it down. And I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend you read this book. And it's called Lifting the Veil on Enrollment Management, subtitled How a Powerful Industry is Limiting Social Mobility in American Higher Education. And Stephen Bird really did his homework. You know, he traces the history of enrollment management, the abuses of enrollment management, the pressure admission officers feel to emphasize rankings. And it's really one of these books that he interviews a whole bunch of different experts. So I'm just going to share some of the topics he covers. And you might want to pick this up right away because I'm interviewing Stephen Bird and one of the key authors featured in the book, Don Hostler. That's coming up shortly. And so if you're able to read this book, you'll be able to follow so much of what we're going to discuss. So the book starts out talking about the rise of enrollment management and U.S. News college rankings. And that's an interview, an article with Neil Swidley. Then they look at colleges' reliance on enrollment management firms and how they grow despite the alarm over their strategies. And that's John Marcus from the Hechinger Report, who we've featured here many times. And then views from inside the school perspective. That's Don Hostler, who's been studying this or been in enrollment management for 4 years. And Don Hostler's going to join me in the interview with Stephen Bird. So we get the insider perspective. And he's going to talk about how it changed. And he's seen it change before his very eyes. And then in part 2, looks how the federal government helped fuel the growth of enrollment management. You know, then the book gets into the design of federal student aid that made enrollment management's worst practices possible. And then the book gets into the Justice Department's view on antitrust in higher ed and how that's bolstered enrollment management. And then the book looks at how enrollment management works to limit college access and affordability. And then it looks at the college list business. You know, we've talked about that before. Student search. There's 3 different people interviewed on that and how that impacts enrollment management. And then it talks about the troubled relationship with enrollment management and diversity. And then it talks about the dangers of financial aid leveraging, which is a really important topic. And then finally it talks about gapping. And then there's recommendations for the enrollment management industry. And then it talks about why the nation's price controls are needed for public education. So it's just a really, really good book. You might want to pick it up and read it before we have this deep dive discussion where we talk about some of the most powerful forces behind the scenes shaping higher ed. Now I return to my interview with Matt Carpenter. You know, I did what you're talking about, Matt, with both my kids, or I should say they did it because it's in their name. And they came out of college with high 700 credit scores. The other thing I did was add them as an authorized user to our credit card and cap their use at max of 500. And this helped contribute to their high 700 credit score because when you add someone as an authorized user, they get credit for your good credit. You know, and it led to all kinds of other good things. So, you know, a lot of times like you, because I'm in this space, people group all loans together and there's this immediate reflexive reaction. No, the L word. And sometimes it's understandable because, you know, sometimes you'll have a parent say, look, I didn't pay my loans off till I was 45 or I'm still paying them off. I don't want that for my kids. But normally when you dig a little deeper, there's private loans or heavy grad plus loans or things that they're talking about. And always happy to have someone articulate the difference between this particular loan and so many of the other loans that are out there and not just group them all together in the same bucket.
Yeah, it's, you know, something that we'll say is like really, you know, surface level, maybe a little bit controversial, but we're pro loans. We're just anti, you know, too big of loans. And there's ways to define that, but certainly just the federal direct student loan it falls within that threshold of being a meaningful investment. And I understand kind of Dave Ramsey's philosophy of all loans are bad, but I push back on that a little bit here. I think like most things, there's some nuance in there. There's some gray area. And to me, this falls within that, you know, with what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and I think you'd agree it's even gotten better with the new SAVE plan. You know, that new SAVE plan is, and it's so much better, especially if someone's going to have less than a 6-figure income.
Absolutely,
you know,
right. Just another, again, reason why utilizing this in some capacity is generally the right thing to do.
Yeah, because there's literally potential for someone to maybe get loan forgiveness and having paid less than that $27,000 back. And it was just a good business decision.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So let's talk about a different loan, Parent Plus loans. One thing I really appreciate, having attended, talked with you several times and attended several of your webinars, you guys are great at nuance, and I really appreciate nuance. I usually make the case that if you need a Parent Plus loan, you're maybe living above your means. I don't like that Parent Plus loan. But there are some exceptions. So why don't you lay out the case for why we don't like Parent Plus loans, but why there are some times when it is an option that may make sense in certain instances?
Yeah, you could argue this is the hardest year to defend Parent Plus loans. Or
9%.
To be a champion, 9.08%, 4.25 origination fee.
Yeah.
So effectively, we're talking about 10+%, right, for the life of that loan, which is a shame. It's a real shame. So again, I think we will be recommending it less than we ever have this year. However, I'm confident, as a matter of fact, I can already think of a few instances where it's made sense for families. And there's probably a couple things worth talking through. Some a little more obvious than others, I guess. Now, look, for some families that just, it's their only option, okay? They don't have a great credit score. Their income is on the lower side of things. They're getting denied for private student loans. They're getting denied in the state loan options, right? And this is their last chance. And matter of fact, Peg Keogh, who you know on my team, we call her the fairy godmother of financial aid. In her words, she won't mind me saying this, she's been on record here, but she thinks plus loans are predatory loans. And I understand where she's coming from because there's no income requirements. So you could really argue that these families that I'm kind of describing here should not be approved with to get these loans oftentimes, right? Again, everybody's different. There's no catch-all here. But the argument against that is they're trying to do everything they can to send their kids to college and make it happen, and they're willing to do anything, right? And so that's hard to argue with. And I've talked with many families that I don't want to talk them out of it because that's all they care about, okay? And that's what they value beyond anything. And, who am I to say they're making a poor financial decision? They're well aware of it, basically. But there's also, that's not the only families that we say, well, you have no other choice. There's still a robust forgiveness program for families if you are a civil service employee, right? So you're a nurse, you're a firefighter, a police officer, you work at a lot of, again, there's some, you have to make sure that you're eligible for this program, right? But if you work at a lot of nonprofits, for example, my wife had a meaningful amount of grad plus loans because she went to law school, right? But then she worked at MIT here in Cambridge, and she was actually eligible for the forgiveness program after she had to be employed there for 10 years, right? Which she was, because of how the organization MIT is structured, right, as a nonprofit entity. So again, it's not just some people think, well, I'm not a professor. Even if you're an employee at a college, you're still very likely, or an organization of the like, eligible for some forgiveness programs here. But there's some meaningful caveats there. It doesn't start until 6 months after the student graduates from college, and then you have to be employed for 10 years within that forgiveness kind of entity, right? Within that nonprofit type of entity. So if we're going to go that route as a strategy, I have to be able to say, I'm all but certain I'm going to be employed here for the next 14 years. That's a long time, right? That's a long time. So, but again, for some people, it makes sense, and they've got to win from that, right? There's been some wins there. I would say the other kind of less talked about option, and this is one where I don't know what, maybe I'll have to get creative with my language, but intentional or not, you can almost, I don't know if beat the system is too aggressive of a statement here, but if you have a very low income and you qualify for a plus loan, which you can, and you defer it and you put it on some type of income contingent, income-based repayment plan, your minimum monthly payments could be incredibly small, and they could be as low as $0 a month, right? Your minimum payment. And after 25 years, whatever is left on a PLUS loan is forgiven. So there are scenarios where somebody qualifies for a PLUS loan, they have incredibly low income, they have incredibly low payments, and it's forgiven after 25 years. Now, there's a tax bomb there, but again, that family is usually still net positive overall. So just kind of an interesting thing, kind of an unintended consequence, I think, of how these PLUS loans are structured, but that's just the deal. Another thing on the kind of the morbid side that is just worth mentioning, because it is a unique part about the PLUS loan, is that the loan, if there's a God forbid scenario, the loan dies with the borrower, right? So if there's an older parent or a sick parent or whatever, something like this, whatever they borrow is forgiven. Unlike any other loans where the co-signer, co-borrower, or whatever is going to inherit that. So.
Yeah, I love the nuanced conversations, because I would agree with Peg. I do see it as a predatory. And if our listeners weren't following that, so if you go to get any loan, you go to get a car loan, you go to get a home loan, they're going to look at your ratios. They're going to look at your income and your expenses and make sure that you have enough income to qualify to pay the loan. Well, the PLUS loan doesn't do that. They look at something called adverse credit history. But what that means is that somebody with next to no income can get a $50,000 loan. And a lot of people have levied this as one of the many causes for the increased cost of colleges, when colleges have a built-in way of just bilking families and throwing a huge loan on there. And then you have families that say, well, I have to do absolutely anything for my kid. And then there's some horror stories that can result. Then you also have a situation sometimes where people qualify for 1 year, then they have adverse credit history, and they don't qualify in another year. And then you're stuck unable to pay the loan, and you may have to drop out of college. So I see them as predatory, but I still wanted you to make that case, because there still are some instances. The hard thing is, like you said, do you know you're going to work 14 years in your nonprofit job? And most people, even if they are indigent, they don't expect to be 25 years out, and to plan for that may not be the most prudent thing to do. But I never say never. I still encounter, sometimes I'll have someone, they're in the last year, the kid's in college, and they have some unforeseen financial situation. And so do they take a PLUS loan out for 1 year versus have the kid have to drop out? Like, there are some scenarios where it makes some sense. And so glad we could dive into the nuance on that. Friends, this concludes the first part of my interview with Matt Carpenter. We hope you'll join us next week for the final part.
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
Friends, in part 2 of Linda's interview with Tara Williams, the Dean of Barrett Honors College, Tara talks about how Barrett builds community. Tara talks about the number of Barrett-specific events and warns us it is a big number. Tara talks about whether non-Barrett activities are available to Barrett students. Tara talks about the admissions process to get into Barrett. Tara talks about a major change regarding the test score policy for Barrett that will begin with the class of 2025. Tara answers the question, is there a fee for Barrett? Tara talks about scholarships for Barrett students. Tara talks about when the essay prompts are released for Barrett. And finally, Tara talks about the misperceptions that are out there about Barrett Honors College. Listen and enjoy.
We want students to feel like there are people here who know their name. There are people here who care about their success. And whether it's some unexpected, like perhaps they had their car break down, or perhaps, they're just struggling in a particular class, or perhaps they just have a really great idea and they want to figure out how to make it happen. We're the place that can support them in all those ways.
I'm glad you said that, because when I put a big university on a high achieving students college list, I always tell them you got to take a look at the honors college, like Barrett, because I think that honors colleges have the ability to immediately shrink down that big university, and give you that kind of home base like you were talking about. So for Barrett, I know you do all kinds of things. I just read that you had Bill Nye the Science Guy on campus for the Rhodes Lecture. Um, how else are you building that community that you talk about?
Yeah, we really think about community as absolutely the heart of our work. And our values are two of our key values are community and belonging. And to me, that means every student shows up and feels like they belong and like they are welcomed exactly as they are, the whole person that they can grow and develop, but they don't have to change to fit in. That this is a place that wants them to come and be themselves. The way that we build community really starts with that residential experience. So spending 2 years living with the Barrett community just provides that foundation for them. We also assign every incoming student a peer mentor. So that mentor is someone who is going to give them just-in-time information about what's happening in the college, is going to provide them with opportunities to get together with their small mentoring group and just give them a resource, right? Somebody who has been in their shoes and can tell them how to take that next step, or give them ideas about how to engage in the community. We also have peer academic leaders. So these are students who are more advanced in their undergraduate experience, but are from the specific academic colleges, and they do programming around like the honors business student interest, right? Or the honors engineering student's interest. And then we have actually over 100 events every semester just in Barrett. And some of them are small pop-up events, like it's the first day of classes and, there's a pop-up to get popsicles or, things like that. And some of them are bigger scale, kind of more signature events. So we just had what they call the red carpet event at the Phoenix Art Museum, where students were able to, get dressed up and come and see the Barbie exhibit and just hang out for the evening. So the events are an important part of that too, the student organizations. But I think a lot of it starts with the classes as well, because the classes are set up so that the students meet each other and get to know each other and really have a relationship already just from that experience that they go through together.
I love that. And Barbie exhibit, that sounds kind of interesting to me. So how do Barrett students interact with the greater ASU community? I assume they have access to all things Barrett and all things ASU.
It's absolutely a yes and. So our students have all that Barrett offers. They have this community that they're a part of, but they also are completely integrated into the rest of the university experience. Barrett students are leaders in student organizations in the academic colleges, undergraduate student government. Pretty much at every level, you're going to encounter the Barrett students who are making a contribution and making a difference. They are very much engaged members of their major disciplines, their major colleges. They're really having all of the opportunities that ASU offers and all of the support that Barrett offers at the same time.
Right. So let's talk about how you get in to Barrett. So how do students apply? Are they invited? What's the secret?
The secret is we do not want there to be a secret. We want it to be as open and transparent as possible. So students do need to apply to the university first, and then there is a separate application to Barrett. So we ask them to share with us not only about their academic performance and achievements, but also about what they've done beyond the classroom. And that might mean extracurriculars, it might mean volunteer jobs, but it might also mean they helped their family or they volunteered at their church. We want to know about their full experience and profile and who they are. They also are going to do a couple of short essays as part of the application so we can get a little more insight into how they think, and provide some recommendation letters so that we have that as well to take into account. But we really want to be able to see who these students are in all the facets of what they have done. And we are looking for students who are interested, engaged, curious about lots of different things. They can apply. Most of our students do apply as first-year students, but they can also realize that the Honors College is here once they're at ASU and apply in their second semester. They can apply as a transfer student. We tried to create as many pathways into the college as possible because we think we have a pretty great experience to offer, and we want as many students as we can accommodate to be able to come into that experience.
That's great because, sometimes you don't know what you don't know until you get on campus and realize, oh, there's this cool thing happening over there. So when they apply now, ASU is test blind. Is Barrett test blind? Do they have to submit any test scores along with the rest of the application?
So we have not been accepting test scores for the last several years. Starting with the next cycle, we are going to allow students to share their test scores if they would like to, but it won't be a requirement, and it won't be something that disadvantages them if they choose not to.
And is there an additional cost to be a part of Barrett?
So there is a cost to be enrolled in Barrett. It's free to apply. Once you're in, there is a fee that's associated with Barrett, just like there is with nearly every academic college at ASU. It's part of the funding model of the colleges here. So there is a fee associated with it, and that fee is what goes to support the faculty and the staff who are teaching the courses, creating the events, really putting together that honors experience. We also know that the fee is something that can give pause to a family or be an obstacle for a family who is thinking about this. And so we really want to make sure that nobody decides not to engage with honors because they're worried about the fee. We do have some aid that we're able to provide to students if it's truly something that they and their families can't afford. We want to be able to talk to them about that and look at the options for support that we have.
And I know with some honors colleges or honors programs, a scholarship comes along with being admitted. Is that the case at Barrett?
So there aren't automatic scholarships, but there are scholarships that are specifically available to Barrett students, and we are working all the time to increase those numbers. There's an annual cycle, so students, once they're admitted, can apply for those. Usually around March is the typical deadline, and all Barrett students are able to apply for those.
When do the essay prompts for class of 25, when do they drop?
So they're usually released somewhere around the middle of the summer.
Okay. That is definitely on my mind right now. So what do you find are some of the common misconceptions about honors colleges or about Barrett, and how do you address those?
One misconception that I see that students and families sometimes have when they're thinking about an honors experience is that an honors experience at a university level will look a lot like an honors experience at the high school level. And sometimes at the high school level, students choose honors classes in the areas where they feel particularly strong, right? Or AP classes or whatever it might be, because they think I'm already strong in that, right? So I know I'll do well. So I'm an honors student in that area. And we really think about the honors experience as not something where you come in and because you're already excelling. It's a place where you're going to learn differently. It's not about adding more work. It's not about it being harder to get a good grade. It's about being with a group of really engaged students with a really dedicated faculty member and exploring fascinating questions and interesting texts together, having more hands-on learning experiences, just being able to have a kind of exploration together in that space. So I would just encourage people who are thinking like, I'm not sure honors is for me, or like, I feel like I'm taking on a lot with the change to university, and I'm not sure that honors is something I want to put in the mix, to think about it as that space that can be really interesting and inspiring and even different from what you're doing in some of the other places in the university, and something that's a source of support, of resources, of opportunities, rather than of obligations.
Friends, this concludes the second part of Linda's interview with Tara Williams, the Dean of Barrett, which is the Honors College for Arizona State University. We hope you join us next week for the final part. Okay, friends, you know I've started this series on Mondays called Missed Opportunities, and I'm chomping at the bit to get back into it. I've had bad internet and couldn't do it last week, but in my preparation, I keep adding new segments to this series. So you'll be getting this for several weeks on Mondays, just me talking about opportunities that I see people missing out on, that hopefully to be forewarned is to be forearmed. So I'll be sharing a missed opportunity in the college admission process. And then, friends, we have another brand new interview, and it's one that you have requested. Linda will do it, and it's with Robert Kirkland, who's an expert on the service academies, West Point, and many other topics. And this week we're talking all things West Point. It's going to be a 4-parter. It's going to be a deep dive into West Point. And if that name Robert Kirkland sounds really familiar, about 3.5 years ago, I interviewed Robert Kirkland on the ROTC scholarship and everything you need to know about ROTC. You can go back into our 190 interviews and just put in Kirkland, Kirkland, in the search bar. It'll pull right up if you missed that one and you want to hear it. And friends, remember, it's not where you go. It's not where you go. You know, this is a pound the pavement phrase for me. It's not where you go, but it's what you do when you get there. It's what you do when you get out of there. See you Monday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stylianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcasts. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.